Tensions in Syria continue. Turkey's 5-day ceasefire in Syria expires today as President Trump says that he plans to keep a limited number of U.S. troops in Syria to protect the oil fields. The president weighed in during a cabinet meeting yesterday. Watch.
I always said if you're going in, keep the oil. Same thing here. Keep the oil. We want to keep the oil. And we'll work something out with the Kurds so that they have some money, they have some cash flow. Maybe we'll get one of our big oil companies to go in and do it properly.
Turkish President Erdogan is set to meet with his Russian counterpart today to discuss ways to drive Kurdish forces away from Turkey's border. Joining me right now is retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane. General, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Good to see you, Maria.
It's interesting to hear the president now talking about keeping troops there to protect the oil fields. It's exactly what we've been talking about. The fact that you had Iran on its heels, and now with the oil fields potentially vulnerable, that could give revenue to Iran to get back in business with ISIS. What's your take on the president's most recent commentary about the oil fields in Syria and keeping some troops there?
Well, I think that's absolutely critical. We cannot let those oil fields fall into Iranian hands. And we're not going to change what we've been doing. The United States was never using its troops to defend the oil fields. The 60,000-plus Syrian Democratic Forces that consist of Syrian Kurds, and forgotten in the last couple of weeks because of the controversy over walking away from the Kurds, are also Arab forces by the tens of thousands as a part of this Syrian Democratic Forces. They do two things in the area. One is contain ISIS and make sure the Iranians do not seize the oil fields. And I think that mission will largely continue now, assisted by a limited number of U.S. ground troops. But the thing that guarantees that protection is that the United States controls the airspace. Our air power actually is decisive in ensuring that the Iranian proxies do not come across the river and seize those oil fields.
And you think that the U.S. will control the airspace then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The telling sign for giving up the airspace would be to take out all of U.S. Ground forces that are assisting the SDF. And there's a limited number of our forces there, to be sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so are you feeling differently now about the president's plans then? Because initially when the president first said he was going to pull all the troops out, people like yourself and Lindsey Graham and others were saying this is the big mistake. He can't do this. Now, Sunday, Lindsey Graham joined me on Sunday Morning Futures, and he had a complete reversal after speaking to President Trump, saying, look, I think that there is a path forward. I think that so long as we protect these oil fields and leave a limited number of troops, I think this can actually lead to winning in this strategy. Do you agree, or are you still concerned about the president's pullout?
Well, I agree we're moving in a much better direction now than where we were. A couple things are pivotal here. One, the meeting with Erdogan and Putin, as you suggested in the introduction, that is crucial. Putin's got a huge agenda here. He's got a foothold in the Middle East because of his military incursion into Syria. He wants to gain more influence in the Middle East than the United States has had since the end of World War II. And he's achieving some of that. And clearly what he'll work out here will be in his interest in Syria. So that meeting and the results of it is something we have to pay attention to. We still have to pay attention to, are we going to be able to move into a permanent ceasefire as a result of today? Because today, Maria, is the end of the temporary ceasefire. Erdogan has been advertising that I want all of the Syrian Kurds moved immediately in 5 days to the safe zone, 30 miles away from the border. Well, that's hundreds of thousands of people. That would be a humanitarian crisis if we moved all of those people wholesale like that in 5 days. Yeah. There's no place for them to go, no shelter, no facilities, etc. So that's not happening. So hopefully we continue to negotiate the establishment of the safe zone, Maria, as opposed to going back to military force. Possibly what Erdogan will do is, number one, he should agree to a permanent ceasefire, but maybe extend the temporary ceasefire in agreement with the United States.
Right.
But today is going to be a very pivotal day. One, the Russia meeting, and two, where Erdogan comes out as a result of that in terms of what to do about the safe zone.
So what's your stance on what Iraq is saying? Iraq is warning the U.S. that any troops leaving Syria are not allowed in Iraq. This statement contradicting Defense Secretary Mark Esper, who said that those soldiers will travel to Iraq to continue operations against ISIS. More than 700 troops are being pulled from Syria. Are they going to Iraq, and Iraq says they can't come there, or are they going to Saudi Arabia, or are they coming home?
Well, I think it sounds to me like that's a negotiation in progress, how long they stay in Iraq. Those troops that we're talking about are largely the ones that are in the very northern part of Syria that pulled over to Iraq. And the Iraqi government, I'm sure, had agreed to that movement, or we wouldn't have taken those troops into another country's sovereign territory without their permission. But they may have some internal political pushback against that, and that's what's reflected in those comments. I think we'll negotiate that through. Some of those troops will obviously be involved in Syria in some way. Some of them may move out of Erbil and move closer to the Syria-Iraq border, and likely a little bit more in Syria than in Iraq, so that they can respond to what's taken place in eastern Syria. So I think that's a work in progress, Maria.
All right. So because I just wondered why Iraq would say that. Why is Iraq saying don't come here?
Yeah, I think that's the reason. We can only speculate. I'm confident we got permission to move our troops in there. How long they were going to stay may have been something we were negotiating.
Meanwhile, we're reducing troops in Afghanistan. The top American commander there says that the number has dropped by 2,000 over the last year. President Trump defended that decision to withdraw troops in both Syria and Afghanistan. Watch this.
I want to bring the soldiers back home. No. They were supposed to be there for 30 days. They're there for 10 years. We're in Afghanistan there for 20 years. We're reducing those numbers very substantially in Afghanistan. But they're supposed to be in Syria for 30 days.
That was the president talking with Sean Hannity last night at the White House. You know, you have to believe that the average person out there is pleased with these moves. I know from a general perspective, and you're looking at some of the issues in terms of the world and the impact of ISIS perhaps coming back. But when you look at 2020, I think this decision is actually going to help the president in terms of re-election, because most people don't want their American troops everywhere in the Middle East.
Well, we don't educate the American people as to why they're there, why there's a risk to the American. If people understood what the risk was to America, they would, I think, be willing to leave a modest amount of troops in Afghanistan, which now, I mean, in Syria, which is now less than 1,000, and certainly in Afghanistan, which General Scotty Miller has reduced those forces on his own initiative, obviously with defense approval and with White House approval, 2,000 from 14,000 to 12,000, and he would fully admit that he could probably reduce it a little bit more, because the mission requirements that he has been reduced. But there's still a threat there of al-Qaeda and ISIS, and I think it's reasonable to maintain some troops there to ensure the security of the American people. That's what this is all about.
Sure, of course. It's all in the U.S. national security interest. General, it's good to see you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, good talking to you, Maria.
General Jack Keane joining us there.